It probably wouldn't surprise you to hear me say that I'm a bit of a movie buff, or at least I like to kind of think of myself as one. And one of my favorite directors of all time is Steven Spielberg, and of all of the movies that Spielberg has done, really one of my favorites is Lincoln. At the beginning of the movie Lincoln, there's this scene of a Civil War battle where you see these black and white Union troops fighting against the Confederates in like this nasty mud and swamp water, and it looks just completely vicious. And that took place at a battle called Jenkins Ferry. Now, not much is known about Jenkins Ferry, really in the big scheme of things. You know, people know about Gettysburg and Vicksburg and, Chickamauga and places like that. Jenkins Ferry kind of has flown under the radar, but was one of the bloodiest battles to be fought west of the Mississippi River. So today, I've traveled down to Arkansas. We're right here by the Saline River at the spot where the Battle of Jenkins Ferry was fought. All right, now to understand the Battle of Jenkins Ferry, you really kind of have to know the bigger picture of what is going on. So really, in short, 1863 was a pretty good year for the Union and a pretty rough year for the Confederates. The Union had won at the Battle of Vicksburg. They had also won a big victory at Gettysburg. And following on that success, Lincoln was wanting to make an incursion down into Texas. So a guy who had been a division commander at Vicksburg by the name of General Frederick Steele was put in charge of the Union Army of Arkansas. And under his leadership, they were going to be trying to link up with a couple of other Union armies in Shreveport, Louisiana, and from there go down into Texas in something that became known as the Red River Campaign. And it ended up being a bit of a mess. Now, here at this park where I'm at, they have some maps and some interpretive signage that really help us to understand the Battle of Jenkins Ferry and the Red River Campaign. So I'm going to try and kind of give a big overview of what happened. Okay, so as I mentioned, Steele is going to be starting off here at Little Rock, and he's going to be making his way down kind of along where Highway 30 would be today, roughly. And he's looking to link up with General Banks's army down in Shreveport. Well, Banks's army ended up getting held up and were defeated. Whenever that plan goes awry, well, Steele ends up turning and going here towards Camden, Arkansas. There's a battle at Poison Springs that takes place. Another big problem that Steele is facing is with supply. His supply line is really, really stretched out, and they're having problems foraging for supplies. And eventually, after trying to make a little bit of a stand here in Camden and to try and get supplies and things like that, whenever it's obvious that the Red River Campaign is not going to happen, Steele starts making his way north to try and get back to Little Rock. Now, under the leadership of General Kirby Smith down here in this area, whenever the Confederates find out that the Union is turning around, well, they see this as an opportunity to strike. So they start chasing Steele's army right up through here. And right here at this spot, where I am standing right now, at Jenkins Ferry on the Saline River, is where the Confederates are finally going to catch up with Steele's Union army and have a chance to crush them. Okay, so right here at this very spot on the Saline River, the Union Army had a big job ahead of them. They were going to have to construct a pontoon bridge across the Saline River here in order to get their men and their supplies over here to the northern side of the river and then make their way back to Little Rock, or else they could risk losing the entire state. So in order to do that, there was a rear guard that was going to have to stay south of the river and basically hold off the Confederates, or else there was the risk that the whole Union Army of Arkansas was going to be destroyed. So we're going to actually kind of move south to where the first, I guess, engagement, I guess you could say, of the Battle of Jenkins Ferry took place. Okay, now we've moved south of the Saline River now, and on April 26th, General Steele's Union Army would have started really making their way north, trying to get back up to Little Rock, and they would have been advancing north along this road that I'm walking right now. And on the 29th of April in 1864, the Confederates would have caught up with the rear guard of Steele's army right here in this area. Now, I know a little bit about this battle, but there are others who know quite a bit more, and I happen to have a few of them along with me today that can kind of interpret this battle in this area a little bit better than I can.
We're at the site of the Cannonball House, which was the initial actions of the Battle of Jenkins Ferry on April 29th, 1864, after Steele, General Frederick Steele, Union General, evacuated Camden with his army in a hurried retreat toward Little Rock. The Confederate cavalry under John Singleton Marmaduke, specifically Colton Green, caught up with the rear guard in this area known as Guess's Creek, and a skirmish ensued with some artillery fire exchanging between Samuel Harris's Confederate battery and the Springfield Light Artillery. This is the site, used to be, of what is known as the Cannonball House. It was used as a field hospital after the engagement of Jenkins Ferry. The house also was known to have a cannonball that had gone through the wall and partially the ceiling. Unfortunately, the house was burned down probably in the 70s, so there's nothing there to see except the site here, but this is where the Battle of Jenkins Ferry pretty well got started.
All right, now you can see on this gate here they have this cannon to kind of symbolize the presence of what Meggs was calling, or what everybody calls, the Cannonball House here in this field. Meggs was saying that back in the 70s you could still see this house, and he actually said that he has a picture of it. But unfortunately, like he said, it burned down, but it was used as a Confederate field hospital. And there are different diary entries that Confederate soldiers have talking about this particular spot. And supposedly, like with many other Civil War field hospitals, you could go there and outside of the window would have been a stack of dismembered arms and legs that had been amputated from soldiers who were wounded on the battlefield. All right, we're going to go ahead and move north, kind of follow Steele's route, and get up to the main battlefield here at Jenkins Ferry. All right, well, we've just made our way to the main battlefield here, and the area where I'm standing at now on an old Confederate map was called Groom's Field. Now later on, famed historian Ed Bars called this Cooper's Field, so sometimes you'll see it referred to as both. And the Confederates would have assembled and lined up right here behind me, kind of where you see that distant tree line. Now, one thing about Jenkins Ferry, this is not like Gettysburg or Vicksburg or anything like that, where you have these markers and trails and well-defined areas. This place is pretty wild. You can see the area where I'm at right now was once a field. It grew up. Now it's been clear cut and logged. So there's definitely a lot of exploration and I don't know, I guess a little bit of guesswork that goes into exploring Jenkins Ferry, which I like that. I like the exploration part of history. But anyway, we're going to kind of continue taking a look around here. This is where the Confederates would have moved through. I'm facing to the north right now, where they would have been pushed towards the northern lines. And whenever you look at that map, you can see that the Confederates are getting funneled down to one position where the Union is going to be waiting for them. All right, we have moved over to the other side of the battlefield here. And where we were earlier, we showed the road that the Union under General Steele advanced north, and where Kirby Smith's Confederates were following along and had that brief engagement or little skirmish. Well, that road continues north right here. This is the old military road that leads up to Jenkins Ferry. So this is where the Union would have passed through, and then the Confederates would have been right behind them. So they would have formed up right here behind me and would have been moving to the north, pursuing the Union troops. And again, because this battle space hasn't been protected, you really have to kind of use your imagination to envision, what exactly happened here. But there are some key pieces of the terrain that really help us to understand what happened in 1864 here at the Battle of Jenkins Ferry. All right, so again, this is the old military road. I'm facing north, so in this direction is Jenkins Ferry. And if you look right here off to my left, well, this is Cox Creek. And as you can see, the banks of this creek are quite steep. So this is really going to limit both sides as far as their battle formations. It's going to be a very difficult feature that they have to cross. If you were to look back in that direction, kind of on the other side of that tree line, kind of looking into the sun right now, there was an old slough back there. So again, that's going to be difficult to move through. So it's going to essentially funnel the Confederates right out into this area right here where the Union is formed up. So kind of what we're looking at is almost like a fatal funnel that the Confederates are being pushed into. Okay, so I just mentioned Cox Creek, and right here at the place where I'm standing on the military road, there's a spot where the creek takes like almost a horseshoe bend, and it was right here in this area that a very significant action took place during the Battle of Jenkins Ferry. There was a gun battery that was commanded by Lieutenant John Lockhart. They were a Confederate battery from Missouri that had orders to advance to the front. And they actually came through here and advanced well ahead of the Confederate lines and got out in front of everybody else. I think they got a few shots fired off. And right out in the distance here was the 2nd Kansas Colored Infantry. So these are African American soldiers who were fighting for the Union Army. And anytime the Confederates and the black soldiers of the Union fought against each other, there was a certain savagery in the fighting that took place between them for obvious reasons. Well, the 2nd Kansas ended up charging Lockhart's gun battery, ended up overtaking it. There were some Confederates who tried to surrender. I think there were 2 or 3, and they ended up getting bayoneted. Again, back to that savagery. But that all took place right here in this spot. All right, well, I'm continuing my walk north here towards the Union position, and even though the battlefield is not really preserved at all, you can still stand here and kind of imagine these formations of Confederate troops marching across this field in like ankle and in some cases maybe knee-deep water, pouring down rain, and you got the creek to the left and the slough to the right, and they're getting funneled down to this Union position. And as they were getting closer and closer to this spot, the volume of rifle fire and canister that would have been flying back and forth across this battle space would have just been almost a constant roar at times, and had to have been horrifying. All right, we're gonna go ahead and continue to push on up to the Union position here.
Okay, the natural depression of the battlefield that they call the Swale at Jenkins Ferry afforded shelter. The Federal soldiers used it first as they were driven from their first position as the Confederates came out of Giles Field and went into Cooper's Field. Cooper's Field was basically the kill zone, and in the center of Cooper's Field was a natural depression called the Swale. The Federals had evacuated it and fell back to the timber that was on the north side of Cooper's Field, where they had erected crude breastworks out of logs and felled trees. And the Confederates sheltered here to get out of the withering fire. There was a murderous fire. It was so intense that the smoke in this area of Cooper's Field was so thick from the thunderous volleys that the Federal soldiers reported that they actually looked under the smoke to see the masses of Confederate soldiers moving across Cooper's Field, where all the frontal attacks occurred at Jenkins Ferry, and would shoot under the smoke and generally hit their mark. So when the Confederates advanced further than the Swale, they were generally driven back, largely due to Samuel Rice reinforcing his defensive positions at the proper times, especially when the Confederates would try to attack in mass. And of course, attacking by brigade, piecemeal, they never could amount enough mass of soldiers to overtake the Federals. And then again, the Federals were fighting desperately to save their train and their army. Right here, the Swale, a very significant part of the battlefield.
All right, so as the battle continued, the Confederates kept pushing and pushing and pushing against the Union line, and the Union was desperately holding out, trying to basically save, as Megs was talking about, the Union train that was trying to get across Jenkins Ferry. So we're going to leave this part of the battlefield right now and head to the part where the Union Army was saved right there on the Saline River. All right, we've made our way back here to the Saline River bottom, and what we're looking at right here is the location where the Union troops would have constructed their pontoon bridge. So it would have been over here right about on this side and would have went straight across kind of down to that low spot right there. And once they had it constructed and got everybody across, they ended up destroying the bridge, and then of course started making their way north to Little Rock. All right, well, there you go. That was a little bit on the Battle of Jenkins Ferry. So you saw it referenced in the movie Lincoln, and now perhaps you know a little bit more about what took place here in 1864. Now, as I mentioned, once the Union made their way across the Saline River here, they destroyed the bridge, but that was not the end of the story. They were still on the retreat, heading north to Little Rock, and they dumped out a lot of stuff out of their wagons to lighten their load along the way. So the next episode, we are going to be going out onto the battlefield and along the retreat route with some metal detectors to try and recover some of the artifacts from the Battle of Jenkins Ferry. And one of my favorite movies from Steven Spielberg is the movie Lincoln. And at the battle, oh boy, good start, JD.